Hey everyone, Rushlock here with another episode of the Dev Blogs from Ivaganda from Rixx Javix. Today's article is titled A Dying Breed. If you're enjoying this series, make sure to hit the like button down below, leave a ridiculous comment below the video as well, and we'll dive in here. A Dying Breed. The Space Pirate. It has always been a hard choice in EVE Online. You pay the iron price for choosing to base your play style on player versus player combat by maintaining a negative security status. There are zero benefits to being so negative that other players can freely shoot you anytime they want. You are banned from HiSec, and any mistakes along those lines can get you killed by the police. In Stay Frosty, we take this concept even further into absurdity by building our entire reason for being upon the idea of good fights and living from loot, theft, and ransoms, all while primarily flying solo or small for real, against incredible odds. Blobs, fleets, cap droppers, sinos, recon traps, and all the wonderful anti-pirate stuff you can imagine. It is no surprise then that old-fashioned piracy in EVE is dying out. Back when I first got into piracy back in the 2010 era, there was no end to the number of proud pirate corporations in the game. 13 years later, and you'd be hard-pressed to name one that hasn't been moved into a wormhole, evolved into something else, simply faded away, or is hanging on by a thread to the old ways. And while certain individuals here and there might be keeping the flame alive, the numbers, the organizations, the alliances built around the piracy are hard to find these days. Uprising made this situation much, much worse. Improvements to factional warfare increased activity in levels in low-sec, which is good, but also pulled resources away from established pirate groups, which is bad. More critically, however, is the harsh restrictions that eliminated the vast majority of our tools. The sweeping broom of change removed pirate ships from the equation. It is no longer viable to jump into a Daredevil or a Dram, or a Succubus or a dozen other ships because they can no longer slide into the faction warfare plex. These ships were our force multipliers, the way a solo or a small gang player balanced out the fact that we often face 3 or 10 times the forces we are able to bring to an engagement. When every plex is full of Navy Desis, with frigate logi, what is a solo player's options? I know that most people reading this are going to be unsympathetic to our plight. I also know that I represent an increasingly small number of players. Yesterday I was curious about just how many Neg 10 players actually were in EVE Online, so I asked about it on Twitter. CCP Fozzie immediately came back with the number 2,223. I don't know the criteria he used to come up with that number, as being exactly -10 is increasingly challenging to maintain these days. But even if we assume that the number would double or triple if we included Neg 9 and below, 5,000 or 6,000 players in the universe is not a significant percentage. And why would it be? There is zero real benefit to being negative. I get nothing from it that helps me in my gameplay, other than the small chance that some other player might engage me on a station or a gate, which, while that used to happen pretty regularly, is rapidly becoming a rare event these days. However, if pirates represent a small percentage of actual players, I see this as an opportunity. Because let's face it, content is king. And while we might be a small fraction of players, we also represent a huge force for content generation. Especially if you widen the scope just a little to include those groups who are pirate, like in their operations in low-sec space. Do that, and our numbers start to represent a significant content source. One wonders then, wouldn't it be a good idea to give the primary drivers of conflict in low-sec an actual benefit to maintaining a negative sec status? I think so. This is an easy fix. Any player with a Neg 9 or below security status can ignore the restrictions in place on the appropriately sized factional warfare complex. Once again, Daredevils could slide into Scouts, Sentinels could slide into Larges. Once more, Nurgles and Hawks and those lightning-based ships that I haven't used in so long, I forgot their names, could be back in space again, haunting the space lanes. Once more, low-sec would become more dangerous. Pirates would be scary, rare, and able to disrupt the status quo. All of which works together to make all players better and space more interesting and viable. Such a change would inject much needed vitality into a dying breed of gameplay that desperately needs it. There is currently no real reason to be -10. Let's change that. It's time. If we wait any longer, there may not be anyone left to enjoy it. So, going back to early parts in the thread here, I wanted to ask a question about so Uprising coming out. Definitely put more traffic in low-sec. Good. Agreed. Also pulled resources away from established pirate groups. Bad. I don't know what this is in reference to. Is it that players that were doing non-faction warfare low-sec activities then gravitated toward faction warfare lowsec for activity and gameplay, or is there some other resource that I'm not aware of? This isn't a contention point. This is a lack of clarity or understanding on my part, and I don't know what's going on there. So maybe somebody can make a comment down below and let me know. Yeah, I don't know what the tools lost are. I don't have any context here. This is just ignorance on my part, and maybe we can get some clarification or more details there to help explain it. I like the overall idea of adding value to being -10, because you are choosing to give up access to high sec to an extent, right? You can just make an alt, and your alt can move your stuff for you. You can have a network contact. If anything, it makes a great magnet for a social interaction. Like, hey, now I need a smuggler, right? I need somebody with a clean record in high sec to bring me my stuff. Rixx has mentioned in previous posts that that's a pretty common practice, right? Usually you have an alt do it yourself. You can have it on the same account even. Maybe that's something to look at as well. We can't really value -10 or -9's negative security status at all when on the same account you can just have an alt do all the things that you are quote-unquote locking yourself out of, in my opinion. It's kind of an oversimplification, but it's a counterintuitive element to the argument in my mind. Like, why does it matter if you're negative security status if you can just click a button, log off, switch characters, and do the thing that you lost, quote-unquote, on the other character? It's an inconvenience. You have to train up some other skills on another character, of course, but the accessibility is still quite high. I do like the idea of there being a benefit, or benefit's probably not the right word. Incentivization. There being a reason to desire a negative security status. Not in terms of, oh, I log in, I'm neg9, I'm neg10, and making buku isk because of it, but instead a content access thing. And I read Rixx's example here of a possible, he calls it an easy fix. Maybe that means in terms of coding or programming, or I'm not sure what, because I don't think it's that easy. If somebody is running plexes in faction warfare space, and they right-click show info, and they believe they understand the mechanics of the complex, and then all of a sudden a player shows up that is not bound by the same rules, and there's not clear communication on that, that's not a good game state. I presume Rixx would expound on that and say, well, we need to update the tooltips on the show info screens and clarify that. I would argue that it doesn't take into account that users aren't that bright, right? They're not going to understand what that means from a newer player perspective. An established player would, and you could argue, well, the new player just needs to get good, learn the hard way, and then get over it. But the practicality doesn't seem to be there. I'm not saying it's a terrible idea and that it shouldn't be looked at, but there would certainly need to be more polish or more thought going behind it. And if that's the case, it takes it immediately out of that easy fix designation. Admittedly, personal biased, anytime I read something as an easy fix, I immediately want to tear it apart. I immediately want to strip it down to its bare components and start nitpicking. All right, this is shit, this is crap, this is a horrible idea. Just because more often than not, quote-unquote easy fixes are in fact not easy. But I agree with, and I like the premise of adding value or incentivization to being -10, and going back to the idea of what could reverse course on this. Let's look at the actual core issue here, and that is increasing the population of space pirates. And I have not an easy solution for it, but a simple one. It's time for Rixx themselves, or Rixx to find a patsy to put this project on the desk of, to open a space pirate school. Maybe school isn't the right word. Maybe we can find something more lore or more theme, aesthetically pleasing. But functionally, there needs to be a space pirate school. We have the opposite of it. We have the wormhole PD, which will take Vinny and the boys will show people how to go into wormholes and blat people. You can probably find any number of special interests. You have Abyssal Lurkers, taking new bros in and getting them started on the Abyssals. The stream recently for myself, I've been taking people into their first Abyssal runs and handing out ships for first-time explorers, basing out of the Wormhole PD's HQ station, and trying to help stock the pond for new folks doing wormhole crime and or getting scanning and hacking and EVE in general. And I want to expand that. And if I had a destination to send people to, like, hey, does being a space pirate sound fun? Fun to you? If it does, let me send you here. But somebody has to build that here. And I don't know even the beginnings of enough to try and educate people on how to be a space pirate in Eve. Rixx does. And maybe if Rixx designs the curriculum and can find another nerd to handle the administrative work, maybe that'd be a better way of repopulating. Now, that's one part of the equation. Rixx also wants to address and try to see some forward progress on, great, we've got more people wanting to be space pirates, but now what are they going to do? And I think that's a big topic too, and maybe we can tackle that in another post. But yeah, I think the concept is interesting. I've been over the months and maybe even years now poking at Rixx to do it. Do it, Rixx. Let people who want to be space pirates have a place to land and get them started. That's more work for Rixx, and we want to avoid that, right? We want to keep our desks clean. And so maybe this will incentivize and encourage Rixx to find someone else. The great hunt for, maybe it doesn't need to be an individual person. Maybe it could be a handful of people. So if you're listening to this and you enjoy the idea of space piracy and you want to help Rixx out, speak up. If you need help getting in touch with Rixx, I can help you with that as well. He's not hard to find, but if you need a point in the right direction, ping me and I'll get you passed on to Rixx himself, and we'll see what comes of it. But we'll see you all in the next video.